Tabletopped will start after the following messages.
Hey everyone, it's me, Nick, from the Tabletop Podcast. When I'm not hosting, I'm thinking about ways to create a better podcast for you guys, and I think I landed on something pretty fun. In fact, if you go to our Patreon at patreon.com/tabletopped and join for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a new episode a month that we're going to start putting out. In fact, we're going to be calling this one Wild Magic, I think, in that we're going to talk about anything and everything that interests us, not just TTRPGs, though there will be a lot of that. It is truly unhinged, and if you are a fan of the podcast and all of the hosts, you're definitely going to want to be on it. We're thinking of dropping these at the end of each month, so join our Patreon today. That is patreon.com/tabletopped. Oh, and there's going to be so much more coming out in the new year there, so don't miss it. Sign up today.
Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop. Today we got one of the best in the biz, baby. We have Grant Nordine from Game Master Monday on the podcast today to talk with us a little bit about his most recent miniseries, Bunnies and Burrows. Go check it out. It's so cool. But also, Game Master Monday does this all the time. They do these really amazing, in-depth miniseries in new systems. And I thought, well, how would somebody do that at their table? So hopefully Grant will be able to shine some light on his process. But Grant, welcome to Tabletop. How are you?
I'm great. Hopefully is right. Let me tell you, hopefully is what I'm always aiming for. Like, hopefully what I say makes some kind of sense.
It's more art than science. We all know that as well. So
it's very true. It's what tangent will I go on that eventually lands on the desk of someone way bigger than me, and then I get known for something weird. I've had this tendency in interviews lately where I come up with a metaphor on the fly, and then, I don't know, Grant Howitt, for example, will be like, "Oh, you're the guy who talks about shit and flies, right?" And I was like, yeah, that's me.
I guess. I guess that's my brand.
Yep, here I am.
So tell me a little bit about Bunnies and Burrows and the Game Master Monday sort of mini series format, so that our audience can kind of know what we're talking about when we talk about a mini series and what you do with these. And also for the folks who don't know, they'll be able to learn a little bit about Bunnies and Burrows as well. So take it away. I want to kind of get a sense, level set for what your idea of like what makes a mini series and stuff.
For sure. So what we do at Game Master Monday is we do a new one-shot typically in a new system with a new cast every episode. Go to the tagline. And every 6 months or so, what we will do is we will just take a month where we do a little like 4-part miniseries, which lets me get out my need to tell a larger story every now and again and satisfy that craving, while also just like, you know, breaking up the monotony. And I was saying earlier that like our mini series for me, like kind of like symbolically usher in and also end like a previous era of what was going on at Game Master Monday, you know? So like if I think we've done 3 on the show proper, and we also did a spin-off series called Bella's Comet back in fall of last year. So as far as Game Master Monday goes, you know, our mini-series usually come at the tail end of like 6 months of work. We do something bigger and weirder, and the cast is very symbolic of the types of people we've been able to have on the show in months previous. Like our first one, it was like, oh, this whole cast is literally just like my actor friends that live in my hometown, because that's who I could get to do the show. And then like the second one, which had yourself on it, which is the Golden Galaxy race, was like, I've met a lot of really great podcasters. I'm going to pull some from the shows that have inspired me the most and who are just insane enough to do essentially a solo RPG for like a full hour and a half with me. And, you know, Bunnies and Burrows has been the amalgamation of a lot of really hard work, improving our storytelling methods, meeting a lot of people who are like on a higher plane than I am. Like, holy shit, why are you working with me? So that's kind of been like how I view a mini series in the context of the podcast. Bunnies and Burrows itself is entirely the fault of the Game Master Monday Discord.
Which is very fun. Everyone should join the Discord if you haven't already. It's a very fun little community.
we try, man. They're all nuts there. I'm just like the head clown in a car full of them, So it's just it's like a good time.
If there was an alignment chart for this Discord, it would be unhinged good, I feel like.
Yes. A little bit past chaotic. They're a little freaky there. They got some interesting thought. I'm making it sound like it's a bunch of like insane people being nice, which it is, but like it's a very cool community. We've had people just like hook up through there, start their own shows through there, make their own systems. Our general chat is called the Waffle House, so that gives you any idea of the vibe you're getting into. But I love the Discord because they float systems to me all the time. And Bunnies and Burrows just happen to slide across my desk because I was complaining about Burrows' End from Dimension 20. And I was like, why are they doing D&D for like this game of their animals? There's so many great systems where you can play animals. Like if they're going for Watership Down, surely there has to be a system that like fits Watership Down better. Yeah. And then I learned, there's a literal system based on Watership Down.
Yeah.
That's about playing rabbits and overcoming trials and surviving things. And it's like, it was right there, Abria. It was right there. So,
she's a huge listener, so we can start some shit.
One of these days, listen, I personally think these larger TTRPG shows who will have an audience regardless of what system they play owe it to these audiences to just, anyway.
Try a bunch of different systems.
It's a whole thing. Yeah. Listen, I started shaking my fist about this when they did Coffin's Run, a game about vampires in D&D. I'm like, come on. Anyway. So I get Bunnies and Burrows sit across my desk and I fall in love with the system. It is stupid elaborate. It is it's by the cool people over at Frog God Games. They do a lot of like D&D supplements, but they have this one game where they're like, we took this game from the 70s, we got the rights to it, we are remixing it and remastering it and adding a whole bunch of cool shit to make it its own independent system that can stand apart from its source material, which is cool. Yeah. And I got really into that. And when I started digging into it, the idea that birthed the concept of the miniseries was how it does character creation. Because in other systems, you have like your standard arrays, you can roll for stuff, like all this stuff. Bunnies and Burrows like grabs you by the head and says, you have to roll for your stats. And then whatever one is the highest, that's your job forever. And it's like, oh, I can goof around with predestiny in this shit,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the thing I really like about this system, really any system, is seeing how they handle the mini game of character creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I always love it when it has like a very specific viewpoint on character creation. We just recorded a system review of Morkborg, which is also a very
love
sort of
Morkborg.
like randomize everything about your character. But also it makes it so fun to just like jump into like this like weirdo or whatever. And it's in Bunnies and Burrows, it's kind of similar where it's like, I get a sense right from the beginning what this character is from just the process of character creation, right? But just very, very good system storytelling for the players right away.
I love that type of stuff. I love when like you can just get right into the storytelling from the word go.
Yeah.
Because like that character creation is literally like page 3 of the book, I think. Mm-hmm. And that's what really got my brain going. I was like, I know exactly what story I want to tell just by the nature of the game telling me the bunnies have a job they are born with. And I'm like, oh, do they now?
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about the creation of a miniseries. Like you said, this is you trying to get a little bit of more longer form storytelling out in a otherwise kind of one-shot medium. I think that would resonate with like a lot of TTRPG playing groups. Either they just got done a large campaign and somebody wants to do their idea before they jump into like a really long next campaign, or it's a table that tries a bunch of different things, are always kind of jumping around to different, systems and characters, and what a fun table that is. But maybe there's like a sense of, oh, I really want to like get this thing out there that I've been
Yeah.
thinking and dwelling on for a while. So when you were saying you were like building this out, what does that mean for you? What do you start with? How do you go about creating sort of like not a one shot, but a little bit medium sized 4 or 5 episode miniseries?
Yeah, medium size is just the right word for it. I even brought my little handy dandy notebook that my wife made for me to to make the series in, just so I wouldn't lose my train of thought on stuff. But I always come in with like a concept first, if that makes some kind of sense. So the first one we ever did was called Defeating the Dungeon, which I just wanted to get the itch out of the way early. Like I've always wanted to do a D&D show. Fuck it, like let's just do it first so I don't have to think about it ever again. I've had this idea for the longest time that was like, what if I do D&D where the whole point is to be like an ex-adventurer, to recover from the desire to need to go on adventures and fight dragons and plow through dungeons and stuff. So I'm coming up with this concept that's like, let's do D&D but in rehab. Like we're going to intentionally break the system because we're teaching the players to find different solutions inside of D&D that isn't hit stuff all the time or go on a big quest. And that was a lot of fun. And I got it out of the way early so I get out of my system and just tell that story. But that's how I always approach it. So my concept for Golden Galaxy Race was very much so like, I want to do a series where the cast member does more of the heavy lifting so I don't have to, which was partly like cool storytelling mechanic idea, part I'm doing 2 podcasts at the same time. I need to do something that takes more off my shoulders.
Yeah.
This one I approached a little bit differently, and I think this is like what I think people should just do across the board for doing a mini series. If you find a system or a story hook or like a mechanic that really sparks your interest and you want to like explore it, that's always the fire that like sparks under me for wanting to write something bigger than just a one shot.
Yeah.
Not to say my one shot children aren't also beautiful and lovely, but there's always something that's like, oh, there's something really big here that I want to dig further into and like sink my teeth into it and tell a larger story. So for Bunnies and Burrows, it was very much so the character creation process and then how they are able to level up their stats got me really fascinated because it's like, I'm trying to think if I want to explain this in like layman's terms. They have like an advancement point system in this game where like as you do stuff in the game and as you role play and as you do actions, you have complete control of the GM to be like, hey, here's a little something for you. Spend it on whatever you want in your stats so you can adjust your bunny as you see fit. Because that's what really got me going. I was like, okay, so the game is telling me bunnies are born predestined to be good at a thing. And then as they live their life, they can choose what abilities and things they are good at based on their own experience. Sick. I'm writing a game about religion.
Yeah, it definitely has the sort of like the predestination versus free will sort of stuff in there from the get-go.
1,000%. And as an ex-religious person, especially from a religion that was really big on predestiny, I'm like, oh, we're going to explore my trauma now, motherfucker.
Well, this is something that I want to ask you too, because it totally makes sense that you start from like a mechanical way in, because you are a systems person, having explored 1,000 systems on your show already. But like one thing that I'm really interested is, how do you get sort of the arc of a mini series out of it? Because in my experience with being on one of your mini series, like the Golden Galaxy Race, that is a system that started it like is intentioned as a solo sort of journaling TTRPG, but it also has the 2-player aspect to it. And when we ran through it, it's very randomized in like how you explore things, because it's for people who don't know, it's a deck of cards. You draw it, the suit kind of indicates some sort of obstacle, like a category of obstacle, and then the actual card that you draw, like an ace or something, also has sort of a genre associated with it. So you could get like natural occurrence and like a violent creature or something as a combo, and then you're like, oh, okay, so I can role play from that. But as a GM, that makes it very uh how do you say it? It's like when in any sort of like time travel thing where it's like, oh, all of the different threads that go into the future. It's like, which one are they going to take?
Right.
So like how do you make a like a cohesive miniseries, especially with one where you're like, oh, this is going to be 4 episodes long or something and have an end to it? How do you manage that with sort of the randomness that's inherited or is inherently in a lot of these TTRPG systems? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I love this question actually because it really lets me talk into my philosophy about writing endings as a game master. I don't. I don't write an ending. I have no clue how a story is going to end. What I like to do with my miniseries is I like to do a lot of pre-writing so I can understand what's been happening in the world before we start.
Mm.
And I'm not going crazy elaborate. I'm not writing languages or anything. I'm not coming up with like, oh, the High Council of whatever the fuck has this king and it's the whatever generation and stuff. I'm not good at high fantasy, so I don't do it.
And if the players do not speak in my made-up bunny language, then they are out.
This is a game with a bunny language, and I just had to like dance around it a little bit. There's an episode, it's already come out at this point, so like it's hearable, but like in episode 2, there's a scene where like the rabbits are talking to a pair of foxes, and one of my players fully like points a gun at me, and is like, wait, how can you talk to us? And I was like, everyone speaks the same language in the forest. It's magic. Shut up.
I love that.
But that's what I like. I like to do a world that has already existed up to this point. And when you enter the story, the things that have happened have happened. And then it's up to you to see what you want to do with the information you're getting. So like I give them a hook in Bunnies and Burrows. It's, here's this rabbit. He started a warren. He's your spiritual leader. You all like him. And then over the course of that episode, another rabbit comes in and says, hey, your guy is full of shit and I'm not. And then it's a question of who do you listen to? Who do you want to believe?
Right.
Do you want to go explore for yourself? Are you loyal to the first guy, et cetera, et cetera? So I try not to lead too strongly into like, here's my intended ending or here's what I want you to get out of this.
Yeah.
It's a 4-part miniseries. I want it to be guided by the player's choices. So I give them a lived-in world that their characters have been living in so that they understand how the world works, and then they can choose what to do from there.
Right.
And then it's just a matter of like adjusting based on what they know. So sometimes I have to take pieces that I did plan for and move them around or just take them out entirely based on how they're playing the game. I imagined a much bigger story for this other rabbit who came into the burrow to fuck their shit up. And as the story progressed, I was like, I think there's less and less of a need for this character. I think he did what he needed to do. So let's just pluck him from the story and let them explore other shit.
Yeah, that's awesome. So basically, you're what Franco, one of the other co-hosts on Tabletop, what he calls like sandboxing, where you create a sandbox with like a very firm set of like a set of informational points that the players can be like, okay, this is how everything is going. This is my character's current trajectory if nothing ever happens to them. Right. And then, like you said, you have an inciting incident, and then you just sort of like let the players lead from there. And that's the way you kind of get your general story, which seems to be working really well for Game Master Monday. But one thing that I'm really interested in too, just from and this is also, if it sounds like I don't have any sort of knowledge in this, it's because like I think approach things from such a different perspective. Like you saying that, I actually always as a GM kind of want an ending, not how it ends, but I'm like, okay, this is going to be the like mountaintop that they're kind of moving towards, just so that I as a GM, when I'm asked questions or if I'm asked to like do something on the fly, that I can kind of orient towards that thing to give them like the best shot at like kind of doing what I have prepared. I love the idea of not having that and letting the players do it, but how do you then make sure that, because if it is a time limited thing, like a mini series where it's, 4 or 5 episodes, how do you make sure that, the thing happens, I guess, in 4 or 5
organically,
episodes,
not like speed, like bullet training it right at the very end.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you got me there, Nick. No, No, so like, okay, I don't write an ending. I don't know how a story will reach its conclusion in any given miniseries. I'll use defeating the dungeon as my framework for this because I very much so use that story to lampoon on storytelling. Like it's like the nature of storytelling and adventures and heroes is very much spoofed on in that series. Like very literally, the inciting incident happens during a speech where a public speaker is warning the heroes what an inciting incident is and how to avoid them and not thrust yourself into adventure. And then he gets eaten by a dragon. So it's like it's like this right now. What's happening right now?
Don't get fall for this.
Don't get involved. Exactly. So, but like in that series, I have these 3 big named NPCs that are all integral to what's been happening in the world, and any of the 3 of them could be the big final thing. Like that's all baked into their story and their character. It depends on what line they want to follow. In Golden Galaxy Race, we keep baiting you with this mythical guy who went into space and went missing. Yeah. And 3 out of the 4 of you could not give a shit. It was very funny, except for Kim, who finally gets there in the last episode, finds the guy, and it's like, I think he's just fucking die. Like, to hell with this dude. And it's like, cool, that works for me. Great. Like, who gives a shit? In Bunnies and Burrows, kind of a similar thing. I have NPCs and characters where it's very heavily hinted at, this is the thing, right? Like, I'm not sitting here teasing you with the idea of exploring faith through rabbits without there being a god stand-in, right? And if you want to do that JRPG thing where your goal is, I'm going to fight that fucking guy, he is there to
I'm
fight.
Gonna punch God.
Like, I'm going to destroy that fucking guy. Absolutely, no question. You give me to be a god, I have questions about the god, I'm going to kill the god.
Yeah.
But they don't have to. They could just take up umbrage with their main leader, and then he could, have a whole thing that unravels behind them. There's a whole other flock of rabbits they can go and find and see what their whole deal is. Maybe they're into it. Maybe they like what they're putting down. I don't know. They could have been eaten by an owl in the forest for all I know. Yeah. Like there's a whole bunch of things where I'm like, this could be how it ends. And I try to keep my own expectations separate from that. So I'm like giving them acorns to follow here and there, and what they do with it is up to them. I'll be honest, with Bunnies and Burrows, I'd be like, if they don't want to fucking like challenge this main thing towards the end, I will be a little sad, but I will understand.
Yeah. And then you just are like, okay, I have this thing prepped. I know that if they are dealing with this in a really active participatory way, then that is probably close to the end, and then you can sort of adjust your storytelling towards the end and be like, yes, this is the ending, I grab it.
Yeah, exactly. I like to use it like, rules of odds and evens. I like using episode 1 as like an establishing episode. I like episode 2 to explore and travel and discuss the events of the previous episode. I like episode 3 to come in and throw a curveball based on what you currently know and make sure that there's every information that you need to finish off the series is given to you at the very latest by the end of episode 3. And then episode 4 is always go fucking nuts. Like you have everything you should need. You should understand what's at stake, what's important to your character. You should know all the NPCs at this point. What is the ending to your story? And then we rock it from there.
Yeah. I really love the idea that like, that one, you just are like kind of just offering. You're just presenting a bunch of offers, and then whatever they take, you're using that to continue on.
It's a sandbox buffet.
Yeah. Also, I think that you can either agree or disagree with this, but in my experience, like players are, they are the product of the culture that we all are in anyway, and so they can pick up story cues. You know what I mean? So they're like probably also using their internal player brain, being like, oh, this NPC is named, and Grant didn't have to like think about what the name was before he said it. So like, obviously this is someone worth talking to or whatever. Like
that's my other big trick, by the way, Nick. All my NPCs, I keep an active running list. I have my important NPCs who are named for reasons, and then I keep a post-it note where it says, if anyone asks what's your name, I have a list.
And whenever
Yeah, and whatever the vibe is, boom, it's a named NPC. I look so smart, and you think this has to be important. They have a name. They didn't just say like Rabbit McRabbertson or whatever, you know? This person had
Which
a
is
fucking
also a
name.
very valid name, I gotta say.
But I should have dropped that.
I know, right? Just be like, this is your most important NPC, Rabbit.
I think the stupidest NPC name we have in Bunnies and Burrows that is so very blatantly rabbit is Easter Velveteen.
I love it. Yep. One thing that Mike Sands, who designed and made Monster of the Week, has in there, which I think is just so smart along this thing, is like, here is a format for how to build random NPCs. Build 5 of them before you play, and it's like a name, a general disposition, like crabby, happy, like ready to help, whatever it is, and like a couple of other different factors that are on this little sheet, but it's just like a bunch of tags and keywords, and if you never use it, then great, but if you do use it, then you're like, oh, I have like an in-depth NPC that I can just pull out.
This man's after my own heart. This is my exact philosophy. I mentioned this. We did a live stream after we finished defeating the dungeon, and one of the players asked me like how do you make these NPCs like they're all so fucking bananas and off the wall, and like what's your big secret to playing a memorable NPC? And like, well, thank you for asking and making me feel good, first of all. Second of all, like, come up with the name. They have one thing about them. That one thing is super important to that guy. Run it into the ground.
I did this with Shade. So we were playing a campaign that we did a while ago, and he was trying to buy a shirt at this like college fair, essentially. Because his shirt had been like destroyed by a monster somehow, and he was just like running around this college fair being like, okay, I just need to get like a shirt and I need to get back into this like fight kind of thing. But like the randomized character that I pulled, the disposition was just like suspicious or whatever, and so immediately she was like, why don't you have a shirt on? Like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you making everyone so uncomfortable? And eventually, like, it led to like this little tent that this person was selling shirts out of being collapsed magically because they got irritable with this person, and like the police were called because they were like, there's this random person running around shirtless, like yelling at like stall vendors and stuff like that. And so it just became so good. It's like it really does add something to the
I love that kind of stuff, and like the one thing a character has can be so like hyper specific like that, or it can be just so fucking stupid. I have an NPC that like I still get asked about, named Murphy, from defeating the dungeon. His whole thing was I decided he was one of the players' ex-boyfriends, and he's the one thing that's stopping them from entering this place. Like, he's like literally the gatekeeper. He runs the security gate, and like his whole thing is like, I can't let anyone pass this gate. That's my whole deal now. So like they're trying anything to figure out how to get this guy out from the gate. And it's my thing, like, until they give you a hook that you want to chase as the NPC, because this one thing is so important to you, you stand pat. And then they were like, finally, like, I will go on a date with you. We'll try and rekindle our lost relationship. And I was like, that's it. That's the thing we're doing.
This guy's like, really?
Literally. Has a whole inner monologue with Claire de Lune playing in the background anytime he thinks to himself. Like, just real vapid dude. I love playing. And that's the thing.
I love it. I also have to say, like, if this is like your jam and this is resonating with you at your table of like, how can I make my characters feel like I am a genius and that everything is predestined and like I have made this masterful story, just do this kind of thing for NPCs, even if it's a surprise, because you bring out an NPC out of your back pocket and you give them a little bit of a flaw and you give them like some weird stuff that they are dealing with in their life. And everyone's like, wow, you must have spent hours. Like, how did you make sure that we talked to that person? And I'm like, oh, there's some things better left as a secret.
Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Like, please don't look too much into the fact that I created an NPC for Bunnies and Burrows who is very quickly becoming like the star of like the NPC canon in this show.
Yeah.
Please ignore the fact that I based them entirely on a tweet that made me laugh.
Well, this is the thing. So like in a game that I wrote and was testing out, there was somebody's like ability was to kind of place NPCs that had a friendly background into the game by saying like, hey, this is like my old like war buddy or whatever that is now working in this like small town. And so there were a bunch of characters that were just thrown into the game that I had to honor, which was a blast. But also, like, I had to figure out how to make them part of the story a little bit more than I was planning to, because they're going to be talking to these people all the time.
Yep.
And so there was this bartender that used to be like an old like comms guy, and this person, because he would like did like a tour some in the military, and so it now it's like a PI detective kind of classic tropey stuff. And this person was like, yeah, so good to see you. Of course, I'm ready to help you. I will do anything you need. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm being watched 24 hours a day. I've turned my like small house into like an underground bunker, like total conspiracy theorist wacko.
Hell yeah. Hell
it was
yeah.
great. So they were like, oh no, this person might not be like the most reliable narrator.
Sure, he's helpful, but yeah, no,
So,
I live for shit like that.
I know, right? I think that we got like a really good baseline of how to like approach this when it starts, like finding a mechanic or a system or something that you're really interested in exploring, building out a framework, doing a lot of pre-writing around like what has already happened, and then move into the game. I think after this break, why don't we actually go through with Bunnies and Burrows as an example, the step-by-step of how this went and how you got where you got in the end. We'll be back right after these messages.
Are you the kind of person or unspeakable nightmare horror who likes actual play podcasts, but occasionally wants a break from all the high fantasy heroics? If so, you should check out Negative Modifier, an actual play podcast that specializes in darker, more mature games. You can find us on YouTube, Twitch, and more or less anywhere else podcasts can be found.
Welcome back to Tabletop. We got Grant Nordine here from Game Master Monday.
Oh my God, what a pull.
Being here. Oh man, it's just it's always amazing when we can bring a celebrity like yourself into the studio. But we're talking about a mini series. Before the break, we talked all about how to sort of where you start when you make these kind of miniseries, what Grant uses to inspire him, and how he then goes about turning it into something that can be a miniseries. And then we sort of also touched on how to pace a miniseries through letting the characters lead. But I want to use Bunnies and Burrows as like the firm example.
Yeah.
How you went from nothing to a completed miniseries at the end. So why don't we start from the nothing? You were exploring on this Discord. And someone passed this system to you. What happens next?
We mentioned how I found the hook through character creation, and that's where everything starts really cooking for me story wise. So I knew I wanted this to be something where I could explore elements of like faith, belief, worshiping gods, and I think it's very easy, especially in the TTRPG community, because we're all full of heathens and atheists, to hear that and think, oh, this is going to be a takedown of that concept, right? We're going to have these spiritual leaders who are corrupt or something, or we're going to have an unloving God or something like that. And I'm always like, what is the thing that I specifically want to say? Because I think if you're making an actual play miniseries, this might not resonate for all of your tables, but if you're making it for content, there's always the question of like, what am I bringing to the table that is unique to my point of view and my experience and my voice, right? So
real quick, I just want to say that yes, for making content or podcasts or whatever, that's like a great thing to ask yourself, but it's also kind of a great thing to ask yourself just as like a GM who is doing this for your friends. Like, what am I bringing to the table here? Because my group, one of the groups I play with has like 4 GMs in it at all times. And so every time one of us,
so you're all one-upping each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's really toxic. No, but we like anytime one of us grabs the reins, it's like I'm running something for everyone. There is sort of like this undercurrent of like, I got to make this worth it because there are 3 other people who want to, to also run things. And so I love the idea of coming at it with, what am I actually bringing to the table for people to explore. And I just wanted to put it in that even if you're not making a podcast, that it's a good thing to ask yourself.
Thank you for doing that, because I play so few home games these days. A lot of my experience has been content creation. So sometimes I can get in my head like, gee, I sure hope this applies to like the regular shy kid at their school who's just trying to play a fun game with their friends.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a, you might resonate with this shit. There's a music, there's my guiding star whenever I'm writing anything is a line from Sunday in the Park with George by Stephen Sondheim. And it's like the last big number of the musical. It's called Move On. And it's this character talking to an artist who's like, I don't have anything I want to say. Everything that has been said has already been said. And my North Star for anything creation wise is, if it comes from you, let it be from you, then it will be new. So there's no sense in worrying on if you're saying something new or bringing something exciting and different to the table. It's like, let it come from where you are. And then it hasn't been said before because you haven't said it yet. So where I came from for Bunnies and Burrows, concept wise, was I want to treat this respectfully. I want this to be an earnest exploration of faith and what you can do when you are presented with different, similar, conflicting flavors of faith. So yes, I am telling you, Nick, that I sat down and wrote 3 religions. No. Sort of.
I'm not an over prepper. I just have 100-page document about this world.
Don't worry about it. There's a lot of I also always have like, this is random. This is like off topic a little bit, but I always also, for some reason, find myself pulling from like other sources as inspiration for these things. Bunnies and Burrows specifically was the works of C.S. Lewis. There's a lot of Narnia in there. There's a lot of the Screw Tape Letters, The Great Divorce, the weird sci-fi series he did before Narnia that was bad and sucked, but that's in there too. And I do this all the time, like Defeating the Dungeon was Wizard of Oz, Golden Galaxy Race was the very literal race that happened in the 60s. So like, I'm always pulling shit from that. This is not answering your question. This is more prep stuff. But, you know, this is where my head goes.
I recently did a guest spot on not How Not to GM, but Derek's sort of new collaboration with Neil. Yeah. So I was talking and I'll post about this when people are ready and they can go check it out. But one thing that we got talking about in there was sort of using character archetypes that already exist in media when you're making a character, because we were specifically talking about artificers, and it was like there's so many different types that you can say, but if a player can articulate to you like, oh, I'm actually looking more for like a Dr. Frankenstein sort of thing, then that, like, as a GM, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, like I kind of know what you're going for.
Cultural touchstones are so important for getting your point across. Absolutely. Because I can message Derek and be like, listen, the vibe is Narnia. And he's like, oh, okay, got it.
So it is. Yeah. I think that's like, also like, if you have this thing in your head, you're like, oh, I want to get this out. I don't know really fully what it is yet. If you can even pick for yourself, like, these are the kind of inspirations that are touchstones. If I said, it's sort of like, you know, Bullet Train, John Wick, and The Expendables. It's like, I got a little bit of an idea of what you're trying to do.
So I should expect you to be using random stuff as weapons in brutal and creative ways.
Exactly. Got it. A pencil.
You're going to beat a man to the library book. Got it.
So you're here, you're like, okay, so I want to explore this sort of idea. I don't want to be prescriptive with it. You wrote 3 different religions to kind of get the point across there.
So I want to be clear. I sort of wrote 3 religions. I wrote 3 different points of view about the same general idea.
Yeah.
That are, you know, like, they're all saying similar stuff, but they're all saying different stuff. This is very much so, like, I came up with the rabbit equivalent of Catholicism versus Baptists versus evangelicals, you know, like, this is, when I say that, it's a vibe thing. I don't do deep lore. I don't do saints. I'm just like, this rabbit over here believes in a group of things called the forest gods, and that's why you all have your weird shit, and that's why you have to follow rules, and why there's a certain way we do things. It's all from God. This group of rabbits over here is like, oh yeah, we also believe in a version of that heaven that guy is talking about, but it's a very literal thing. It's right behind me. Here it is. Look at it. And also all we have to do is vibe and just kind of love the main guy over here. And then you have this other group of people who are all like, no, none of that. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? We just want you to be. This is like a big episode 3 spoiler, so I'm being coy about it. But there's like a whole other thing that they learn eventually, and like none of them ring completely right. None of them ring completely wrong, and that's what I wanted to like really dig into. And then the next step, once you have that sort of idea locked in, is like, who the fuck am I going to get to play this?
Yeah.
Who am I going to approach in earnest in the TTRPG space to be like, would you like to explore faith and religious trauma through rabbits?
Yes. And I'm sure that you had 1,000 people knocking on your door being like, I would love to.
It's always interesting coming up with like casting for a mini series, because I will use casting calls for one shots, and then I'll vet the people who come through, every now and again. I prefer to invite people, but if I'm like, it's getting close and I really don't have it locked in, or someone had to leave or whatever, then I'll use a casting call, like look through their history, see if we mesh, and then come on. The mini series, I'm like, I need to take the utmost care of the story and find the people who are the right fit and invite the right people. So like Golden Galaxy race with yourself, I'm like, I know Nick performs and can carry a fucking thing on his own. He's been doing it on tabletop. I follow him on Instagram. I see the weird theater shit he's doing. I can absolutely put him in a room with my sister and I and just let him do his thing for a while, and that'll rock. So like, that's where choosing you for that series comes from. With Bunnies and Burrows, I was like, well, first of all, I tried like not to repeat cast members as much as possible for miniseries. I always want new points of view. And the second thing was, I want people who I know can handle a thick ass book like Bunnies and Burrows. I need people who revel in mechanics, who think about this shit all the time, who have built a brand on it. So Derek from How Not to DM in this current project immediately comes to mind. We've been wanting to do something together forever, and I was like, I'm gonna cash in that favor hard. I'm gonna just throw him into this, and I'm hopefully he digs it.
You used your final game master money to hire him on.
Exactly. I was like, Derek, I know we've always talked about you coming on to do a one shot sometime. How about 4?
You gotta do in the Discord or whatever, make game master money, and when people do something of note, you give them a game master dollar to cash in for Grant's social favors.
Like, you have to do it. I earned enough money for shit. All right,
I have 100 game master monies. Of course you have to do this.
Fine, I'll put my feet on the internet again.
So this is something that I want to talk about. This kind of came up while you were talking. I'm not sure it really has a lot to do with people at home tables, but I want to get your thought on it, because I've kind of either been this person or have done this in games past. The sort of the Jenny of it all, your wonderful sister, who's just like an amazing storyteller, was really fun on Golden Galaxy Race. She did a bunch of the NPCs with you. As a player, though, how much did you involve her in sort of like what you were trying to do? Because I know that she's also a producer on the show, so like that's the whole thing. But did you use that person as sort of like, this is where I'm trying to go, this is what I'm trying to do, to have sort of someone on the inside? Or did you completely like, shut her out and be like, okay, you're a bunny just like everyone else, deal with it?
A little bit of both. Jenny was very in the dark on the plot stuff.
Gotcha.
Because Jenny is at her best when you shock her.
Yeah.
When you throw information she was not prepared for. Oh my God, no one in the biz better at reacting to it and planning around it. Like Jenny is my permanent safety net for anything I do. I can throw anything at her, and I know she's gonna just be so cool in herself and natural in that moment and find like the right answer, the funny answer, the motivating for the rest of the party answer. She keeps the flow going. So that's why she's the mainstay on the show a lot of the times. I know that, hey, Jenny, catch this flaming fucking baseball I'm throwing right at your face, and she's gonna find the funniest thing to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a little bit of experience with this, like when she was when we were doing the Golden Galaxy race, and she did a great job at kind of like talking about this like super pure like crystalline planet that didn't have any impurities
Right?
or whatever. And then like I dumped a bunch of Mountain Dew in it, and she took that and made a whole thing out of it.
So good. I always say that the most well-kept secret about Game Master Monday is Jenny is the better GM and player of the two of us. If for whatever reason I had to stop doing this and it just became Jenny's show, it would be better for it. But she doesn't like the whole dealing with people thing or using social media. Like, she just prefers to come in, do her work, be really fucking good at it, and call it a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm the extrovert who needs attention, so I became the showrunner, essentially. Like, she taught me how to play a lot of these systems. If there's like a thing confusing me, I go, can you read this and explain it in dumb guy to me so I can fucking run it right? So yeah, I mean, I love having her for anything. Anytime I can get her to be a player on anything, I'm just like, oh, thank God, I have my I have my in case of emergency break glass person here who I know will just like keep things steered in the right direction.
And I just want to say for people at home too, if you have a player either who's coming into something late or you just trust in the way that Grant was just describing, like I've played a role where like my character died or I came in late to a campaign, and the GM is sort of like, I haven't been able to talk about this part of the world at all. If I'm going to like give you a little bit behind the curtain so that you can make a character that will really flesh out this part of the story that they just haven't run into yet. It can be a blast. You are definitely sharing some authorship at that point, because whatever they say is going to be true about whatever thing that you made them sort of like a spokesperson for, which is honestly so fun, but also just like keep that in mind. Okay, so we have this. You figured out the idea that you want to explore. You have the system and you have the mechanic that set your heart on fire. And you've sort of then come around to like casting the general idea and giving them a general touch point in your kind of media, like C.S. Lewis kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Where do you take that next? You're prepping either for the first episode, or like maybe the first episode has happened. You've given sort of like the plot that they are going to start with, that you've developed by pre-writing. How do you get then to episode 4 closing out? And I definitely want to talk about, you said that in your structure you usually have like a twist that is thrown in, and I really want to explore how you design that to be part of the game as well. So I know that's really broad, but to take it away.
Sure. No, you know me, just like wind me up and I'll go. So
I'm putting a quarter in the machine. You can just start going.
I'm gonna print your fortune here. So I do want to give my flowers to the other two cast members. So we mentioned like secret information. We had Supriya, who's done a lot of stuff with like Rainbow Dice Club and Beggar Street. And God, if you can get her on anything, fucking get her. Like, I adore working with her. I would make her the third producer of GMM if I could at this point, because like I love how her brain works. I love how she explores things mechanically. I love how she challenges a game master, or maybe just me. I don't know. Maybe we have
maybe it's just me.
Maybe it's a sibling. We like a weird sibling vibe going on here now, where she's just like, I know how to push Grant's buttons. Yeah, because she's been on the show. I think she has the record now for most appearances on the show, just because she's so fucking easy to work with. Yeah. So I think the only two players who I gave secret information to was her and Sadie Pasley, who folks might know better as Oakleaf Insignia on Twitter and TikTok and stuff, makes her own games and stuff. Also a genius role player, does a lot of stuff with, oh my God, I'm going to forget the name of the fucking company now. I'm an idiot. Unbalanced Encounters, I want to say. And just having her on the show, like really like gave us the ability to stretch ourselves as storytellers, because she's so thoughtful about actual play. So I gave them secret info because of the characters they wound up creating, because Sadie's character specifically had the same class as one of the main character NPCs. And I was like, I'm going to throw an idea at you. You don't have to follow it. But if you want, I think it'd be cool if you were this main rabbit's apprentice, because you have the same role. And she was super into that. So she got like a little bit more information about that guy specifically. And then she made it her goal, because she had that info, to challenge that fucking guy and sneak around his back all the time. With Supriya, with the Zoop, her class is what's called a seer, which is a goofy ass thing to put in a game about rabbits and nature. Like, here's a character where they can see into the future or see visions and shit. It's like, okay, cool. There's no way I'm not going to use that in the fucking grand arc of the story. So I gave her like, here's what I'm thinking about this type of character and how they exist in the context of a religious heavy thing. You know, like, you have a power that none of the other so-called spiritual leaders are going to have, and you're the only one in your warren who can do it. So I really wanted her to like grab that and chase it. So that's a big part of how you get to episode 4. It's like, what do my players know out of the gate? What are they going to pick up? How are they going to do that? And then how do we go on the big grand adventure? So I just wanted to make sure everyone knew all of the players are fucking geniuses in this game. There's just masters of their craft, amazing storytellers. I cannot believe we got the people we got for this show. Like, I was listening to Derek's show before I even made Game Master Monday to like literally learning how to fucking do this job. And I've seen Sadie on TikTok for like ever. Like, if you're on TTRPG TikTok, there's a strong chance that Sadie O'Cleaf pops up in your fucking feed. So like, having them as well as my like 2 of my favorite players ever in Jenny and Zoop just there, dreamboat show. So a lot of how to get to episode 4 was just let them do their fucking thing. They're good at what they do. They're good at asking questions. They're good at pursuing and following threads. They're good at challenging those threads. Derek specifically really kept me on my toes lore-wise. Oh my God. That dude is a lore nerd. And he was like, well, if this means this, and what does this mean? I'm like, Derek, I need you to understand that this is an allegory and a not super well thought out allegory at that. So, you know, a lot of it is based on reacting. I'm a reactive GM. I will throw something at them and they have to bat it back at me, or they have to figure out what they're going to do with the information they got. And I think a lot of that hinges. The series is very based on like gaining information and exploring other ways of thought and figuring out why people think the way they think. Because this is supposed to be like analogous with my own faith journey and other people's faith journey. Everyone on the cast has their own relationship with that. So everyone's coming at it from a different point of view. And when we get to the ending, episode 3 literally ends on a cliffhanger, like a vision ends. And I tell them in between 3 and 4, like, you know everything now. The big twist has been thrown at you. And sometimes that big twist is baked into it, and I know what it's going to be from the get-go. Sometimes it's a vibe thing. With Bunnies and Burrows, very baked in.
I have to say too that there's so I went to an acting / writing workshop once where they brought out one of those, you know, best short stories of the year that you can buy at bookstores for like $5 kind of thing. And the thing about short stories, which a miniseries kind of functions as in the grand, you know, comparison between other media and TTRPG campaigns, is the thing about it is that you really only have room for like one main point in a short story. And usually that will revolve around either a reveal of information or a change in perspective of the character by gaining new information. So I think that that is a really good thing too. If you're thinking, oh, I want to do some sort of short narrative thing, but I want it to feel like a complete thing. Think about it like that. Have the idea of there is a certain point at which either something is revealed or something happens narratively that completely fundamentally alters how people can think about the story that they're in, just because then it sets them up to make like the last set of really big choices, and then you can kind of end your mini series. Does that track with your sort of
that was
as well?
Not only does it track, it was cooler and more succinct of what I said. But like 100%. If you're making a mini series, emphasis on the mini part. Don't overthink it. Have like the central thing that your story is about. That could be a theme. That could be a character you think is cool. It could be Strahd. I don't know. It could like whatever you want it to be, but have it be like one thing that you can really chase and pursue and run into the ground and have your players really like bite into that, and then build everything around that central structure. So just for Bunnies and Burrows, I knew the main thing was going to be faith and religion and exploring that earnestly.
Yeah.
And then it says a list of questions of what does that mean from a mechanical standpoint? Well, for one, there's not going to be a big bad guy.
Yeah.
If we're going to explore faith earnestly, there can't be a shadow person pulling all the strings. It's going to be entirely based on the player's perception of what the world is and what needs to happen for them to move forward, right? So I have no big end game boss planned, but every NPC they meet does have a stat block, just in case.
Yeah.
Just in case I want to do that. What does exploring faith through a TTRPG mean? It also means that like there's going to be characters who flat out discredit each other, and neither of them are wrong.
Yeah.
So like you can go through this first part of the game where you're being taught about the forest gods the whole time, and then they go into the forest and talk to a goose, and they go, oh, I know geese from my religion. We literally have a goose god. I'll ask them about that. And the goose can say, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then they'll be confused, like, what do you mean you're a goose? And you know about goose stuff? Like, that's not a goose thing.
So when it comes to the twist, you said that this was pre-baked in for Bunnies and Burrows, but I kind of want to explore both options of either a baked in, I had this from the start, or the vibes thing of like, this is how this has been going, and now based on that, I'm going to drop this. How do you go about those? Like, when do you know that it's time? Do you just have like a set point that you're like, this is when I'm going to do this? Or is it more like, oh, like this thing has triggered, I think this is a good time to drop this thing. I know that we're past the halfway point. It's time to start coming home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely more of the second one for me. I don't like, this is probably because of my improv background and because of who I am as a person, but I don't like the idea that there's like a set thing that has to happen to make sure the thing happens, or just throwing the thing in there because I respect my own genius so much that I have to bring it up, you know. In Bunnies and Burrows specifically, there is, and I'm going to give Sadie full credit for this one, because the minute I dropped the twist on her, she 100% called me and says like, oh, I see what your fucking game is now. And I completely understand what this is going to be. I had a feeling, but now I'm on to you. And I was like, good.
Someone's picking it up. Good.
I think by the time this goes up, the series should be finished, because by the time of recording, the last episode comes out tomorrow. And then
this
Tuesday
will come
we're doing
out with the last episode.
Well, then maybe I won't spoil it.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe I won't say what I was fucking aiming at. And you can just tune into the live talk back tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific on Twitch, where I probably reveal what the big fucking theme of the show is. But no, I had this idea baked in the whole time. I knew that like, if you're going to explore faith, there is a very real agnostic opposite to that. And I wanted to make sure that gets brought up at some point, but I wasn't sure when it was. I didn't know which NPC to hide it in, because the only characters who would know that information are the gods themselves. So in my head from like the beginning, I was like, I want there to be the JRPG moment where they meet the gods, right? And they get the whole shebang, the whole dealio. And then that's like, when in my brain, like that's what the big twist is going to be. Is that when they are told the information directly from the horse's mouth, not literally a horse, but you know what I'm saying. I just had to be clear. It's an animal game, so there could be a horse.
Mr. Ed is like, I cannot actually talk.
Don't worry about it. But it's like, I had that in there from the very get-go, and I was just like trying to think, like, when is it going to happen? And there's a move the players make when they're talking to a certain NPC, and then it just finally, like, it's the sun rising for me. There it is. If I can get them to make this roll now, I know how to drop this on them. And that's kind of how I do it all the time. I wish I could tell you, I was like, you know, there's a very clear thing that needs to happen for this to happen, but it's also like, no, I know my world well enough where I'm like, I can use the information I have as I need it. Defeating the dungeon had like 3 twists baked into it, and it all depended on which path they followed. And they chose the one where they learned that like the guy who wrote their big rehab book is actually a piece of shit with mommy issues. That's the big twist there. So it's like, And they wouldn't have learned that if they didn't go meet him. There's an alternate reality where they go chase a different NPC and they learn that he's a piece of shit with a different level of issues. That whole series is about the pratfalls of hero worship and addiction.
Yeah.
I don't know why I am the way that I am, Nick.
I love that every time it's like, because at some tables people are like, yeah, I was just watching like Ozark and I just really want to run sort of like an Ozark inspired like little thing. You're like, what about exploring hero worship in our culture? Like, how do I
through the most popular game on the planet that is literally built on hero worship in a lot of those campaigns. Looking at you, Baldur's Gate.
Well, okay, so we're coming to the end here.
Yeah,
we've sort of gotten through
I've yapped a lot.
How you sort of like go about dropping the knowledge that you have, that you start bringing people to the conclusion. I really like totally resonate with the idea that it's sort of like cooking, where it's like an instinctual chef, where it's like, if I add a little bit of rosemary, how much? I don't know, like this much,
yes,
like a pinch of whatever.
Yes.
So yeah, I totally get that. But when it starts coming time to bring this home, to like shut it down, essentially, how do you go about that, especially if you're somebody who maybe is like a newer GM, or somebody who's done this 1,000 times, but it's just like, I haven't planned an ending like you were talking about. How do I get a satisfactory sense of closure at the end of this little thing that we've done? Like maybe even you've been 100% successful. Everything else has gone exactly as you hoped it could go. You've dropped the twist in like a really great way, or like whatever reveal you have. But now you're like, how do I close this out in a way that feels satisfactory? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I give the wheel to my players. I tell them, you know everything now. What are you going to do with it? And then it's the matter of rolling with the punches, seeing what they're going to throw at me. The ending to Bunnies and Burrows, live now, is... you can hear me cracking up, like in the background, once the four players really start getting their plan together. And I even have an NPC who's like, are you fucking sure you want to do that? Like giving them the option to like, I was fully invested in it. I wanted them to do it, but I also have to be like the NPC standing to the side, hearing them come up with this cockamamie scheme and be like, really? So I wish I had a more philosophical answer for you, but for me as a GM who's done this now 4 times, I guess total, I give the players complete control of the narrative and I react to their choices from that point forward. My session 4 notes for Bunnies and Burrows is like a sentence, and I believe it just says, let's fucking go.
I really love this. I really love that approach to what I have done in the past and what I've experienced in the past. The ending of any, even if it's a big campaign, I do feel like it's the time where you as a storyteller, if you're the GM, you really gotta like loosen that grip a little bit. If you're someone who really likes to hold tight to your world or whatever, I think the only successful endings I've ever been a part of or experienced has been one where it's like, so what does happen to you? You know what I mean? And then either between sessions, and then you can build a final, get together, sit at a table and play the end of this story together from already gathered what people are thinking and designing something for that. Or just, like on the complete opposite side, you can just, roll 2d6. If it's, above a 10, they get to decide completely what happens to their character. In the middle, there's like a little bit of a give and take. And then at the end, it's like, this is not a successful ending for them.
my personal
on how
game
you want to do that. Like there's a lot of ways to close it down. So like, let's talk about, the last 30 minutes of a session, of the final session. What is going through your head?
What's going through my head, it's like, I can't believe they fucking did this to me. No, my personal game master philosophy is I can come up with the world, the story, the arcs, the NPCs, all of that, but the story itself should belong to the players. everything that happens should be a direct result of their actions. It's not my job to stand in and interfere and move them around like chess pieces. It is my job to be the video game they have to beat, right?
Yeah.
It's my job to be the person they can come to that says, hey, are we allowed to do this? Or like, is this fine?
Yeah.
And then I will just tell them what they need to do to pull that off. Like I'm just the steward of the world. I'm not here to preserve its integrity or anything. So the last 30 minutes of the final part of any arc is very much so just me giving the controller to the players and asking them, what have you learned? What is next for you? Like, how do you, like, what is the end of your story? What do you do now that it's all over? And if there's an NPC they want to talk to get that story nice and sealed tight, I give them that. I act alongside them. I'm always just coming from a place of like, I want this ending to be satisfying for the people who said yes to come do my insane bullshit. Like they are doing me the favor by playing this game that I came up with. So why not just let them have their final moment? And I'm not saying you have to do it this way. I'm not saying that's like the right answer for every GM in the world. It's a collaborative storytelling thing. If you, the GM, have some kind of preference or have an idea that you want to like, hey, how do you feel about, your player going on to do this? And like, oh yeah, that sounds awesome. It was in line with what I want to do. Great, yeah, do that. I just like the idea of the player telling me, like, now that my character has reached this very clear and obvious ending, here's what I want to do. And I love the ending to Bunnies and Burrows so damn much because no one really knew. The ending to Bunnies and Burrows is more of a beginning thing, and it's really fucking tight, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
On that note, I think that this is a perfect place to end it. Everybody, the final episode of Bunnies and Burrows is out now wherever you get your podcast. Go listen from the beginning if you haven't been following it. And there is that Twitch stream where Grant will bear all, whatever that means. I saw there was an age restriction, and I don't know.
That's because I say fuck a lot, and I can't stop myself.
But yeah, Grant's going to be there with the cast, I assume.
Yeah, full cast. We'll have Jenny, Sadie, Zoop, and Derek all live. We're going live at 7 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. If you're hearing this, it's on Tuesday, the 28th. Math is hard. Yeah, 8th. And yeah, we're going to be answering questions live. You can put them in the chat. If you join the GMM Discord, we have a form where you can submit questions a whole day early if you want to. So yeah, if diving deep into like the hows and whys and the what ifs of a miniseries is your cup of tea, come have a sip with us, kids.
Yeah, we'll throw the links to the Discord, to Game Master Monday's Twitter feed, and also just like a general like recommendation. Go download an episode of Game Master Monday. Try it out, see if you like it. Grant, can you give like a the bare bones elevator pitch of what Game Master Monday is for the people who are about to go and click on it?
Yeah, Game Master Monday, we play a new one-shot in a new system with a new cast every episode. If you tune in, you're going to be hearing a variety of indie TTRPGs that are playing in cool, digestible one-shot formats. A lot of your favorite podcasters from across the TTRPG space are in there, as well as some actors and comedians from my hometown of Las Vegas, Nevada, baby. So yeah, come check us out. We're really easy to binge and digest. If like a long campaign's not your bag, you can start anywhere. We've got 3 cool miniseries up right now that are only 4 episodes long. Come give us a shot.
Yeah, I would also say for folks who are at a table that you've just been playing D&D for forever and ever, and you're like, I want to play something else, but how do I get people into it? This is a great way, since it's all one shots, to just like pass an episode, be like, hey, check out this system that they're playing. And by the end of the episode, you have a general sense of how to play the system and usually whether or not it's right for you. So yeah, go check it out. It's a really great show. One of the close friends of the pod. Grant, thank you so much for coming on today.
My absolute pleasure. Anytime, you handsome bastard.
And with that, we're closing down this episode of Tabletop. If you like Tabletop, you can head to the patreon.com/tabletop. Join as a free member or pay whatever you want. We are dropping stuff into that feed for both of those people. We dropped a couple of TTRPG supplemental tables and everything in there for free folks, and also a couple of episodes that will never be hitting this feed. So feel free to go check those out.
The dark forbidden episodes.
Yeah, the dark forbidden ones. And if you want to send in a question for us to answer on the podcast, head to our website, tabletopod.com. There's a contact form. Yes, we do read it all, including you, the person who just sent in about, I think it's Dragonbane. Is that the new TTRPG that everyone's playing?
Yes.
Dragonbane, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, and obviously I'm not familiar with it. Answering this person live on
He's about to be. We're gonna,
but I'm about
hold
to
him
be.
at
I'm about to
gunpoint
dive
and
in.
make him read it. Yeah, it's Dragonbane and Daggerheart. That's what everyone's crazy about right now. Daggerheart, the Critical Role one, whatever. It's those two mostly.
Yeah, those two are huge right now. So we'll be talking about it soon on the podcast. And everyone, we will see you next week.